Hi all, I'm Janelle Peterson. I am a senior consultant with ProTeam Food Service Advisors. Just began with the company a few months ago. And so while I'm a newbie to this company, I'm not a newbie to child nutrition. For the previous 9 years prior to joining ProTeam, I was the food service director at Rapid City Area Schools in South Dakota. And previous to that, a program specialist with the state of South Dakota. So in the state agency. So I love child nutrition. I have a passion for it. I love supporting folks like you. And Jean and I are so excited to share this presentation with you. So Jean, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Janelle. Well, I'm thrilled that Janelle has joined ProTeam. I've been with the company for 4 years. Prior to that, I was the Nutrition Services Director for St. Paul Public Schools, as well as later Chief Operations Officer. And I had all these fun departments: transportation and safety and security and facilities and custodial and technology. And of course, my all-time favorite, nutrition services. I was fortunate to serve as the 2016 president for School Nutrition Association as well. We're excited for the presentation today. We think you're going to learn a few things and a few tips, one of which is how to stay calm in front of the camera. Sharing your program successes, challenges, financial realities, roadblocks, and plans is critical, especially now. Our session will guide you in creating a communication tool with resources that can be used to tell your story to your school board or administration. Janelle and I have a power-packed session on ideas, resources, and content that will give you the tools you need to tell your story through a PowerPoint presentation. You've got to know your audience. School administrators love to get into the weeds. Boards may only tolerate a 10-minute presentation. Your homework. What do your stakeholders already know? What information can you teach them? What are they expecting from your presentation, and what might they find interesting? Here are some of the things you may want to consider, including things you've done well over the years, your student participation, financial implications, the crazy serving models you're doing right now, what's happening on a national level, and of course, the importance of school meals to the students' success. We do recognize that putting together and presenting a presentation can be scary. We get it. We've been there. I'll tell you, I used to, when I first came to St. Paul Public Schools, was convinced that I would never have to get in front of the camera or have to be in front of an audience. I happened to have a brother that was an extraordinary debate young man in high school, and a father that was a Toastmaster expert. So I was a little bit intimidated with a family that really got how to tell a joke and be in front of an audience. Well, I ended up getting over that, partially because I was immersed in it with St. Paul schools. The news media loved to talk about what was happening in our large metro area school district. So it became part of my regular routine. Also, having to present a budget gave me lots of experience. I always say I lost a couple of pounds a couple of days prior to having to be in front of an audience. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you, but everybody does get nervous. I still get nervous when I'm doing something. And I think those sweaty palms that you get even today while we're presenting are normal, and they're actually a good thing. They get you psyched up and they get you excited to be able to do what you're doing. So first and foremost, no one knows your story better than you. Second, practice, practice, practice. Use the notes section to write out what you want to say, then practice and review those notes until you're comfortable talking about each slide. I recommend that you do this in front of a camera, and if you don't want to do that, certainly you can just get in front of a mirror to practice. It helps. And then third, breathe. Deep breath in and out. It will help you get centered and will calm you. Janelle.
While you know your program best, trying to figure out how to tell your administration or board what's going on can be daunting. Trying to figure out what you want to tell them and in what order can paralyze you from even starting. Don't worry, we've got you covered. I'm going to share one of my favorite ways of getting all the information that is in your head out onto paper. One of my favorite ways to develop a presentation is to get some sticky notes. Feel free to mix and match different colors and sizes, and grab a marker or pen. Next, find a blank wall where all these sticky notes can live for a bit. Also, grab your phone or a timer out of the kitchen. You'll need it for timekeeping. Now that you've collected all your supplies, here's what I want you to do. Set a timer for 5 minutes and write down each and every idea that comes to mind that you may want to tell your audience. One idea per sticky note, please. Remember, when you brainstorm, every idea is worth writing down. There's plenty of time later to pare down those ideas. You will use the ideas on the sticky notes to put the framework of your presentation together. A quick word about brainstorming. Brainstorming is a great method to get ideas out of your head and onto paper. Focus on quantity of ideas. Every idea counts, especially the wild ones. No criticism or thinking that will never work. Only after you get the ideas out of your head and onto paper can you start thinking an idea may not be right for the presentation. Here are a few tips when putting together your presentation. You want your presentation to flow as mentioned before, like you're telling a story. Stories appeal to a person's emotional side in ways that facts and figures can't. While you will have lots of facts and figures to share with them, and that's what they like, use a story to share relevant data about what is going on today and has been going on since COVID. When designing your slides, don't let the slides detract from your message. PowerPoint has several pre-designed templates available. Some versions of PowerPoint also help you with design tips. Some of you may find that your district has its own set of PowerPoint templates that they'll want you to use. While a little animation is okay, it's not necessary for every slide. Use the animation to help reveal information that you want them to remember or that keeps their attention. Pictures are powerful. You know the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. In our experience, slides that help keep an audience's attention have a couple of main points. A picture that relates to the point, and then you, the speaker, provides the relevant information, not the slide. Every good story has a beginning, middle, and end. Remember the exercise I suggested using sticky notes? After you've completed the 5-minute write every idea down sticky note exercise, which, by the way, I always do at least 2 or 3 times because it really gets ideas flowing, then review the sticky notes and start placing them in order using the beginning, middle, and end idea. Once you complete that, you now have the framework for your presentation. ProTeam has been creating presentations for school districts specifically for COVID, and the next few slides will explain and show examples of how we built the framework and the order of the information we shared. So let's take a look.
As Janelle mentioned in the previous slide, your story needs a beginning, and that's accomplished in this presentation with an introductory slide. The name of your presentation, along with things like your district name, date of presentation, your name and title, along with contact information, are vital pieces of information that might be included. A picture of your school logo or departmental logo is certainly something you can consider including in this slide. One of the things that's difficult for most child nutrition professionals is to toot your own horn. A great way to think about this is that you really are advocating for your own team. Place this information at the beginning. We've titled this slide Milestones and Points of Pride. In this district's case, they've highlighted their ability to pivot, maintain a financially viable program, and highlight their great staff. Here's an example slide from the middle of our story. Here comes COVID. Here's what it looked like back in March when things first started happening. Your group likes data, so take the opportunity to put in some data. Here we show the number of breakfasts and lunches served March through June. If you choose to use pictures, it's great if you can use your staff photos, as it makes the presentation feel more personal, connecting your audience on an emotional level to the work that you do and your team does. Most likely, you'll have numerous slides in the middle section of your presentation, all of them depicting data and information that your board or stakeholders need to know right now. There are numerous ways to show data-related information. PowerPoint has bar graphs like the one above, along with line graphs, pie charts, or infographics that help display your information in a way that's appealing to the eye, as well as telling the story in an easy-to-understand method. In the slide above, the audience is seeing comparisons of revenue between 2018-19 and 2019-20. The graph on the left compares data from April and May. The graph compares what happened over the course of the year on the right. We use this slide to explain the process students use to pick up their meal in the cafeteria. The use of icons, colored circles in this example, is meant to grab the attention of your audience as well as educate them as they read through the process of receiving a meal. I think you'd agree that the slide is eye-appealing as well as educational, which is exactly what we're looking for. As a speaker, you're able to elaborate on the information on each icon. As you move towards the end of your story, consider including information that broadens the conversation to what's happening outside your district. It gives you the chance to educate your audience about what else is happening in child nutrition. This trend data came from the School Nutrition Association. The link for this information is listed at the end of the presentation. I will tell you that School Nutrition Association has some great tools. You need to take a peek at that. There's a resource and operations report that costs a whopping $59, and it's chock full of great data that can help you run your program as well as benchmark and compare your program. Finally, you need a slide that brings a close to the presentation. This slide highlights the important role school meals are to student success. It also gives you a chance to thank their audience for their attention and gives them a chance to ask follow-up questions.
Thanks, Jean. I always appreciate receiving ideas that I can immediately put to use, and those previous slides certainly provide ideas. Moving forward, we are going to focus on more information that you're going to want to consider including in your presentation. Let's get started. We talked about this earlier. When building an effective presentation, one of the first slides you want to create is sharing what your program does really well. We said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Food service directors and programs do so many things well, yet we are terrible about tooting our own horn. This is a must for your presentation. I'm going to give you some ideas that you could consider starting your presentation with. How about access to meals during COVID? How has your program pivoted and met the challenge of making sure students have access to meals? Does your student nutrition program purchase all of its own equipment? If so, this is a nice point to make. Has your program written and received grants? If so, what are they? If you've done a branding program, you know how important it is to the success of your program. Talk about that program. Procurement. Talk about the steps you've taken to get the best price for your food and supplies. Is your audience interested in USDA donated foods? Oftentimes, this is an area that causes some confusion. So take the opportunity to explain how this food benefits your program and how you are using this food in your menus. Staff, what a great topic to talk about. How has your team rallied and made sure that students are receiving meals? I know there's lots of stories out there on that. And finally, what immediately comes to mind when someone asks you what your program does really well? Make that the first point on the slide. Again, you know your program better than anyone. Write this down. Congratulations, you've got one of your points already figured out. A slide that depicts school meals contribution to student success is always important. In our experience, the beginning is where you want to pull your audience in emotionally as you prepare them for the middle or the meat of the presentation. Your audience loves numbers and data. Use data to demonstrate accomplishments. For instance, even though it was challenging, tell them that your program has served X amount of breakfast and X amount of lunch meals. Compare the data to illustrate changes during prior years compared to today. For instance, participation has dropped by 25% September year-to-date 2020 compared to September 2019. Your district may have limited menu choices due to the need to manage inventory on hand, products available, and only using USDA foods on your menus in an effort to control food costs. If any of those are true, share that information with them. They want to know. Explain how you are using the data you are collecting, be it by meals served, number of staff hours available, and use that to make decisions, and tell them that you are using that to make decisions in your child nutrition program. One thing I will encourage you to spend time educating your board or administration on is just how many moving parts there are to feeding students. Feeding students is one thing. Feeding students in a pandemic is a whole other thing. No one knows that better than you do. Share your struggles and challenges. Now we're going to dig into some key performance indicators, data that you will want to include in your presentation, and will provide you a refresher on how to arrive at some of the numbers you need. You may want to include a slide on where your revenue and expenses come from. Oftentimes, your board members and some administrators have no idea that you are paying overhead and indirect costs, or that you're paying workman's comp, things like that. They may see that a la carte sales are important to managing your budget, or that getting free reduced meal application makes a difference in your program. Worried that you don't have enough data to share with your audience? No worries, we've got you covered. Key performance indicators, KPIs, like breakfast and lunch participation, meals served, costs as a percentage of revenue, as well as data points like the amount of your USDA entitlement funds, can be included in your presentation, depending on how much time you have or the data you want to drive home to your stakeholders. Earlier in the presentation, we said, keep it simple. So pick and choose the data that is impacting your program right now. You may have the opportunity in another setting to go deeper into other data. My recommendation, at minimum, include breakfast and lunch participation, meals served, and food and labor costs. If you're looking for more information on KPIs, the Institute of Child Nutrition has some resources to help you out. We've placed a link at the end of this slide presentation for you. This slide shows the formula to calculate participation rates. To calculate your breakfast or lunch meals for a month, take your total meals, divide by your daily attendance rate, and multiply that by the serving days in the month. Tracking these participation rates on a month-by-month basis are a great way to educate your board or administration, especially when decisions are made by others that affect your program. In the district I previously worked at, we had data that showed the impact of how breakfast participation numbers grew when we served breakfast in the classroom. Our participation rates would go from 11% prior to breakfast in the classroom up to over 90%. Our district also participated in the Community Eligibility Program, CEP, you've heard that. When considering whether we should add additional schools, this type of data was a great tool to have to educate our administrators about the impact of how many more students would take advantage of breakfast, as well as the revenue boost it gave our program. One other story I'll share showing the usefulness of this information that I know lots of you can relate to. We had an assistant superintendent give permission to high school principals to expand open campus to our 10th grade students. Because we had been tracking lunch participation, I was able to show administration the drastic change in our serving and staffing models, as well as our revenue models that were caused by this decision. Knowledge is power, and the best way to approach board or administration is with data. In other words, facts, not feelings. Using icons can help tell your story, and at a glance, make your point quickly. Meals served is one of the data points I suggest you share during your presentation. On this slide, each apple equates to 5,000 meals. On the left-hand side of the slide shows in September 2019, 100,000 meals were served. Moving to the right-hand side of the slide, in September 2020, 40,000 meals were served. Just by looking at the apples, your audience can clearly see that something in your program has changed. Remember when we talked about a picture being worth 1,000 words? This slide clearly shows that you are serving less meals between the two time periods. Be prepared to tell your audience the one or two main points that have caused this fluctuation in the number of meals served. Perhaps only a few grades came back to school. Or are you completely virtual and parents have to pick up meals outside the school? Whatever the reason, be prepared to explain the situation and the potential ramifications. Cost as a percent of revenue is one of the most powerful KPIs you can share with your board or administration. The same formula is used no matter whether you are measuring food costs, labor costs, supply costs, or total costs overall. Using the total dollar amount of the category, food, labor, supplies, that you are calculating, you take that total cost and divide the total revenue into those costs. This will give you your costs as a percentage of revenue. So we've taken that data, and in presenting this slide to your board, it will be evident to them what the impact of COVID is doing to your program metrics. Industry standards suggest that your labor as a percentage of revenue should run somewhere between 40 to 45%. And you can see in the slide on the left-hand side of the screen in September 2019, It was there. The same is true of your food costs. Food costs as a percentage of revenue should also run somewhere between 40 to 45%. Now look at 2020, September 2020. Data on the right-hand side of that slide shows that food costs are clearly higher because of having to move from scratch cooking to purchasing prepackaged food. Labor costs have shrunk since less staff may be needed to cook the food because school is remote. We're serving less meals. The food's prepackaged. Look at that increase in supplies. Most often that's going to be due to the increase of disposables that are being purchased along with the cost of these disposables. You know this better than I do, that the cost of a case of gloves has tripled in some cases. Choosing to present information this way keeps your audience listening to what you're saying versus trying to write down specific dollar amounts. That is always additional information that you can provide to them later if they request it. The one thing that Jean and I hear time and time again are the many different ways you are delivering meals, from on-site to 2 days on, 3 days off, delivering to homes, delivering to bus stops, curbside pickup, and more. Please make sure you include one, if not two slides about how meals are being delivered to your students and community. While you may assume administration is aware of the many ways you are delivering meals, this is certainly the opportunity to make sure that they understand just how complicated serving meals is during a pandemic. Also take the opportunity to talk to them about partnerships that you are using both internally, such as perhaps custodians are doing more, paras, your transportation department is helping, and mention any external partners as well. Not only is meal delivery something that you want to share, but in addition, the work it takes to collect the information. Your stakeholders need to know about meal order forms, parent survey forms, production forms, meal count sheets, and that's just to get meals to those who are learning remotely. One district shared that they went from remote learning to on-site learning with 2 days notice. And that's meant an increase of thousands of meals. It's imperative as we move through this pandemic that when you have the opportunity to tell your story, you do so in a way that is always respectful, but as a means of educating on the intricacies of operating a school meal program. Also, a quick note here, given that this is still a requirement that you need to collect free reduced applications, even if you're running SFSP and SSO, take the opportunity to show board and administration that you're making efforts and looking for opportunities to communicate this information to parents. The slide above depicts that applications are available at serving sites. What a great idea. There is never a wrong time to talk about food safety. I made it a point to talk food safety every time I got in front of a stakeholder. Showing your stakeholders that you are proactive versus reactive strengthens the trust that you are the expert. Developing resources such as the one on the screen, along with communicating those resources, reinforces to stakeholders your commitment to food safety and the safety of the meals you serve to students. There are a multitude of pictures on social media that people are showing that tells your story, and not always in a good light. Take the opportunity to showcase the great meals you serve and offer your students. You know as well as I do that when children are able to pick and choose their food items, they don't always choose a meal that society would consider healthy. Again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Use your social media presence to showcase the fabulous meals you are offering and serving to your students. Yes, this is definitely a slide where you can toot your own horn. Toot your own horn. Perhaps you can use this as a slide towards the end of the presentation with an invitation to your board or administration to come and join students for a meal, post-pandemic, of course. Take the opportunity to educate them about what a reimbursable meal is. Most importantly, show them the wonderful food available to students. You're doing great things. Make sure you're getting that word out in a big way. Remember, approaching any story you tell is always easier when you are proactive versus reactive. We've covered a lot of material. You know your story. You know your audience. I presented to my board and my administration on numerous occasions. Supplying them with the facts and not feelings allowed me to educate them and remain a professional. Oftentimes, I had a 5-minute window to share information. Use that time wisely. If you're like me, I could have talked about my program and the great things we were doing for hours on end. And I used to joke with my board to say, and if you'll give me another 20 minutes, I can tell you even more. I never got that 20 minutes. So you need to learn to tell your story concisely. Always take a moment to thank your staff publicly. And last but not least, have a little fun telling your story. I know it's a great one.
Here are the resources that Janelle and I mentioned during the session. School Nutrition Association has trends report, they have operations report, and inexpensive and chock full of great information. The Institute of Child Nutrition also has some wonderful resources, including the essential KPIs for school nutrition. In addition to having resources where you can learn about KPIs, they have spreadsheets that you can apply to your own district. Thank you so very much for your kind attention during this virtual session. We really appreciate you joining us. Janelle and I are more than happy to talk with you about this presentation, give you some additional tips or some assistance if that would be of interest to you. Thank you.